We are members of the travelling community whose families have been affected by prison. We are mothers, fathers, partners, sons, daughters, sisters and brothers. This is a story from the Pavies.
In this document, we share with you our knowledge and our skills from our journeys in life. Our families have gone through so much suffering. We know racism and discrimination, grief and separation, but we also know about having to keep going for one another.
Our stories are about no one being better than another. We hope that they help someone somewhere. We hope they will help families that are going through similar hard times. We hope that our stories will help make a change.
In the evening times, when my mother's work was done, she might have a few women over. They'd sit at the campfire and talk. I'd be one of the nosy ones. I'd sit beside her. That's where I learned so much. I learned about the culture. Then I remember the women talking about times changing. Some travellers were taking houses and moving into towns. Things won't be the same, the women said. Some dreamed of getting a house. Others wanted to stay in the open, fresh air. They spoke of wanting their children to get an education so they wouldn't need other people to do their reading and writing. For all the women talking around their fire, their dream is for their children to have a better life.
Every person is different. Every family is different.
Some of us grew up on the side of the road. My family moved from place to place, following work. You're seeing more when you're travelling, meeting cousins and selling horses at fairs.
When I was smaller, my parents refused houses. They preferred to stay in a caravan. But as the family got bigger and we all got older, they thought a house would have given us all our own space. I was 14 at the time and I was very excited about moving. But unfortunately, I found the house to be too claustrophobic. I held on to my old hopes and dreams of freedom. And then I moved back into the caravan on the side of the road when I got married. In the field behind us is other travellers. And they've been camping there for years. The council turned that field into an official halting site. And on the site, we like our own bit of privacy. And I feel safe to leave my out front door opened.
Some of us love our houses, but we still travel. Oh, you're a settled traveller, some settled people would say. No such thing, I'd say. They're your own made up words. Some of us are reared in houses but kept a trailer out the back. I always stayed with my brother in the trailer. He would get a great sleep when it rained, and the rain hitting off the window. I'm not one of those people for sitting still in one place. Every summer we'd move out of the house into the camper, for the freedom of it.
No matter where we are, family is number one, and the hope that our families will be okay. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of who I am. When I think of the importance of family in my life, I think of family get-togethers, at weddings or in the house, laughing and joking. Our identity and pride in being a traveller comes from our families. It's in our hearts. It's your lifeblood. It will be inside you, bred into you. You look around and you see, that's your name, your people, your pride.
We've had a lot of racism in our times. When you're a traveller, you're just pushed away from things.
Growing up on the side of the road, my family often got moved on by the guards, out of fear of the social workers. I remember my mother saying, "Come in off the road, the cruelty man will take you."
Some people get low and depressed because of where we're meant to live. For some, any house could be an anchor. You want to pump up the wheels and move on, but there are no wheels. You're too confined, it's like a jail. Some of us feel closed in terrace houses. Could be conflicts with other families. People in the state might not even want you. You wonder, how are they going to look at me today? You know you're not safe. Some pretend to not even be travellers, just to kind of fit in.
It was hard when the settled people told their children not to go around with the travelling children. It was hard being called names at school, and a lot of us lost out on learning because the time wasn't put into us in school.
I was ignored by teachers, left messing with pens at the table. I was let away without doing homework. I was ashamed then because I couldn't even read in front of the class. I wasn't able because I wasn't even getting the help. I was very down on myself. I went through it when I was only a young lad.
I got colouring books when the teacher was giving out geography and French books to the other kids. Oh sure, I thought it was great. But looking back on it now, it really hurt. I wasn't able to read the signs when I learned to drive. I didn't even know the history of my own country.
You might get dressed up and go out into the bar just to be told that I'm not serving you, or get out. Behind you then, you know that they're all watching, and it's very humiliating. It's mortifying. It's as if you have two heads. You might even be out with settled friends and still be singled out and asked to leave. It's not good for young fellas and young ones from the traveller community growing up in Ireland today.
I tried a lot to get a job, labouring. I can't with my surname. You're depressed every day, waiting on the dole, feeling like shit because you can't provide for your family. You have to think about some way of making a living, and that's why nearly every traveller is self-employed. Some of us see criminality as our only option. Drugs, burglaries, stealing. Obviously we prefer to do something above the table.
We won't get jobs easy as travellers. Every time I ever went for a job interview, my father would ask me, what name did you give? And see, I was married to a settled man at the time, but I always used my own old name because I'm very proud of my own name. My father would put his hand to his forehead. Ah, God help us, he'd say, she's definitely not going to get the job now. She gave the name.
Racism makes you not fit in from a young age. Travellers don't feel safe in Ireland today. We don't feel equal.
When people keep bringing you down, giving you knocks, it can make you feel very low. They say you're a knacker or you're a tinker, you're not good enough, go away. You might think, what am I doing this course for? I'm not going to be accepted. They can do great damage to your hopes and dreams for the future.
When those knocks become a regular occurrence, many of us have expressed our upset and anger. Our anger is a response to being treated unfairly and with disrespect, and it's a way of holding on to our pride.
I got put out of school at 14 for arguing with the teachers and kids. When I went back, one teacher says to me, you got through out and now you bring it back like a dog. He was being racist to me in my mind. I got really angry, hit him with a chair and got expelled. If I had my way back now, I would have stuck with school. If you fall out of school as a young person, what have you got to do? The low you can feel.
When you regularly see your settled friends or your best friend led into a pub or a nightclub and you refuse, that causes anger and upset. Or you might break a glass or shout at a bouncer. And the guards get called and they might arrest you and throw you into the cell. Or you'll get angry with society then, and all your dreams and hopes for the future get lost.
Many of us have lost family members who gave our lives meaning, purpose and guidance.
I've lost 3 brothers, and life is never going to be the same for us again. But I wouldn't change the brothers I lost for the world, or the time I spent with each one of them. I wouldn't change the things I did for them, and the laughter and joy they brought me.
I loved, especially my mother. She always says to me, look, don't go down a bad road, son. And I never did. I never even smoked a cigarette until I lost my mother.
Sometimes your grief just wraps you up and cuts you off. For a while, my grief for my father made me forget the grief of my children.
When I was a teenager, I lost 4 people in the space of 3 years. My aunt, my father, my uncle, and then my grandfather. My grandfather understood me. I was always with him, never without him. There was no road too long for us. But one day, he was gone. My whole family were wrapped in grief. And it was up to me to deal with it in my own way. saying to everybody, I'm fine. And when you get fed up, you'll be thinking, how am I going to push this behind me? Bring the dog for a walk. I had that much going on in my head. I was thinking, will I hang myself from a tree and let them find me on their way home? Or will I go back to my family?
Discrimination and grief, depression and suicide are major issues for our community.
A lot of travelling men don't open up about problems. A lot would try to be proud and hold it all in. We're not used to asking people for help about problems or going out and saying that we feel down today. You're in prison in your head, locked in your own thoughts and locking away tears, hurt, grief and sadness. That's a dark state to be in. I've been there outside prison. I've been there inside prison. That is a dark, dark place.
For many of us, drink and drugs have become a way of trying to push the pain of life behind us. A way of trying to hold on to happiness.
Addiction takes us away from what we want in life, especially by the hurt it brings to our families.
Panic attacks I'd be feeling when my brother would go missing for a few days and we didn't know if he was alive or dead.
I know my parents want the best for me. They hate to see the grey in my face, in me life. My father says, you are hurting your mother. I can feel it off him. The way he talks to me. That he is hurting too. I can sense the pain in his voice and how his face looks at the ground.
Addiction can get you stealing for money to buy drugs from family members or other people. My addiction got me to steal for a drug dealer that didn't give a rat's about me. I didn't rob from all people, but I stole from people that might have needed that money to live, to feed their kids. It wasn't me, but it was the addiction.
When addiction takes hold of you, it brings more kind of judgments. Oh, look at your one. Look at him. They're very wild now. They're doing drugs. They're addicts, junkies. That horrible name.
Addiction takes us away from our preferred way of life and lets moodiness and anger take over. It might have us shouting and roaring. And for some of us, the addiction has brought violence, including violence against women. The moment my son goes near the drink or the drugs, you can be guaranteed violence. The guards are even afraid that one of the days they're going to get a phone call saying he's after killing his mother.
The hard thing and the sad thing about addictions in our lives is no place to turn to. When the addiction was on top of my brother, it wasn't just him that was lost. We were lost and desperate as a family. There were times we got him into a psychiatric unit, but he'd be led away again onto the street. At times he was thrown into prison, he'd be put out again to find his own way.
Addiction can tighten its hold when there's nobody to put a hand out and say, I'm reaching out for you, I'm here for you.
Addiction has brought overdoses into many of our lives. My father always said he knew in his heart and his soul he'd get that knock on the door that told him my brother was dead, and our lives have never been the same since. Often when people think of prison, they might think, oh, they're criminals, put into prison to keep society safe. But my family were forced into a terrible dilemma. We saw prison as the only place left to keep our beloved brother safe. Distraught as we were that he was locked up, we could breathe again saying, we'll have him home for Christmas.
For some of us, a partner or son in prison meant we were safe from the fear and violence their words and actions brought into our lives. For years, my heart for my son got in the way of calling the guards. But every woman deserves a life of peace in her own home.
When the cell door closes with a big bang, it rips your life apart. Outside of the prison, your partners, children, and your parents are worried and stressed out. They are doing the sentence too.
Some of us don't tell the children that their father is in prison, especially if the sentence is short or if the child is very young. We worry about what supports are out there if the children are told, and we worry that they might get bullied or talked about in the school. We don't want our children burdened with worry or fear or shame.
I asked my teenage son on the phone what he had out there, but he's not doing much talking about himself. He asked about me. What are you doing in there? I worry that thinking about me in prison is getting in the way of him having his own thoughts.
With a 6-minute phone call a day, you won't get a lot of talking. It's hard for the families that only get 3 phone calls a week. It's hard, especially when there are children.
My son makes a phone call from prison early in the morning, and by the evening then, I'm sitting and I'm worrying, thinking if he's alright. I worry until the next phone call, until I hear him saying, "Mammy, everything's fine."
I go to bed in my cell at night with fear. Will I get bad news from the family in the morning? You see the cold sweats on fellas queuing up for the phone. No matter what happens outside, you're locked inside. Feelings of powerlessness can come over you.
In the boredom of prison, your demons haunt you. But there's a guilt for why you are here. I think about the people I hurt, and I am paying the price in prison, but it doesn't give them back what I took.
There is guilt for leaving family outside, for missing funerals, weddings, births. If you have children, prison is hell with the guilt of missing their lives.
Many of us have taken drugs to try and blank our feelings, and at times some of us have gone into ourselves, sitting in ourselves, not seeing anybody.
Some put on a face of bad boy or a messer or the big man. You might prefer to walk away from trouble, but pride, a fear of being seen as weak, a fear of being bullied, get in the way. Little things that wouldn't mean anything outside can become big in jail. You can get spooked, even when you hear the key of the door.
7 in the morning until I go to bed at night. My time is not my own. I'm cooking, nappy changing, doing school runs, hospital appointments, shopping, multitasking. Some mornings my eyes are burning for sleep. I watch the money to make sure there's food on the table. I worry about the rent.
Getting to visits with my partner every week is a big part of the stress. Sun, wind or rain, visits means long walks and standing in queues with your children. No prams, no toys, and when the toddler is clingy or running around, I have to carry her on one hip and the baby on the other. You queue for the metal detector, then for the dogs, and for the long walks to the visiting box for your 50-minute visit. You could arrive sometimes and only get the bare 15. Once it was 8 minutes when they transferred him to Portlaoise. We were the ones that were tortured, with 200 mile up and back again. I go through it all to keep our family bonds alive.
It's not easy on a visit to bond with your partner and children at one time. Trying to speak to your partner and also spend time with the kids. Small kids run around, crashing into each other. The visiting area isn't organised for them.
When officers say, "Folks, time's up," sadness kicks in. You give them a hug and you see them walk away. I put on my happy face and it's killing me deep down. You go back into your cell and your mind races. Is she going to be alright? Is my child going to be alright?
Many of us worry that visits only make prison normal for our children. My little girl was only a baby when she first visited her daddy. She screamed and she screamed. Her dada, her dada, her dada. She thinks now he lives in jail.
Sometimes during a visit, I would hit a rock wall and my little girl asked me, "When am I coming home?" I'm working packing the lorry for Santa, I'd say. And I was bored.
My first time in prison, I was 8 to visit my father. I remember 7-Up, Lucozade, Hate to Hunt biscuits. I asked him about the tattoos on his mad hairy arms. I knew it was called jail because my grandfather said to my mother, "The children are out, keep an eye on them in that jail." I was thinking, what's jail? Grown up said he was working. He was a long time working. I knew something was wrong. I didn't ask questions because I knew half the answers. I see my little girl looking around now. I wonder, what's going through the child's head? Walking into a totally different world through massive steel gates. A small child looking at a big officer in uniform.
We don't want our children to go down this road. Life is too short to be spent in dark holes and places you don't want to be.
Leaving prison can be a time full of good intentions and plans. In my cell, I have a lovely positive going home plan. Get social sorted, try to get somewhere to live in a low crime place, exercise, eat healthy food, link in with my drugs counsellor and just do everything to stop drugs and to see me kids.
At first you're all excited, but if nothing is set up for you, a lot of us have found that moment of freedom can be a dangerous time for your plans and purpose. You can feel bulletproof when your defences are down. Eventually you go flat, looking for that lift you had when you came out. Old habits kick in. Drug dealers might be looking for debt to be paid. You get back with the old crowd who don't support your plans for life.
My family were so happy when my brother was released, but we're still terrified for him. All we were saying was, what are we going to do to keep him alive? Where are we going to go? He was only thrown in for a few weeks and he'd get out with nowhere else to answer to. Prison wasn't the answer. A few weeks after his last release, he died from an overdose.
The first time that my partner was in prison, I waited on him for 3 long years. He wrote lovey-dovey letters that promised the sun and the stars. But when he got out, old friends were the ones in his ears. He had opinions that a woman's job was at home, cooking, cleaning, minding children. Got in his way of listening to me. Now I'm in replay, up and down to the prisons again, and rearing more children alone.
Most of us are cycled back into prison again and again. For families, it can make the bond lessen when you see no light at the end of the tunnel. It can make families feel that they've failed. The revolving door makes it harder to imagine and hope for another life.
We are not bad people. We are human beings who have made mistakes. But maybe we wouldn't have made those mistakes if we had to get the respect and help when we were younger. Or if society was all right to us. Maybe we wouldn't be here.
What does it say about Ireland? That it allows so much pain of racism and inequality into the lives of traveller people.
What does it say about Ireland when you go to the courthouse and you're looking at a young one or a young fella getting sentenced with their heads down and in another world because of addictions? You know they're suffering somewhere, but they're just thrown into prison.
What does it say about Ireland? That it gets families thinking that they're the ones who have failed.
What does it say about Ireland when your family sees prison as the only safe place to keep your brother or sister alive for another few weeks?